to another episode of the Glowczewski Experience. This is going to be episode 197, and I'm going to continue more character concepts, working on this one. Last episode I done these three, and I was talking about how I work on this guy as well as this guy, but I haven't worked on this one yet. So that's what we're going to do in this video. And I don't know how many I'm going to do, how many squares it'll take up, or whatever. It may be a while till I find out just what I want to do with this jacket. Because in my head, this jacket is something. And in execution so far, this jacket has really been nothing. So, yeah, I want to really work on that. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. And today's date is July 12th. We just passed, well, it's 1 a.m., so we didn't just pass the midnight thing, but, yeah, July 12th. So if you're watching this on YouTube, these are backlogged episodes, and if you want to catch me live, I'm on Twitch as G-Mr. Drew, same name, and if you don't have Twitch, you don't want one, you could also catch these on Patreon. Once I'm done recording them, they usually go right up on there. And for most videos, you'd have to be a patron in order to watch them, but, it is what it is. And let's say, and Patreon, everything just starts off at $1, and then to get commissions and things like that, start at $3 a month, all the way up to $30 a month, depending on what kind of commission you want, man. I'm working on these really large, giant scale pieces, so let me know if you want them. It's all according to square inch, so I'm willing to be flexible as far as like what you can get with certain tiers, but it is what it is. Anyways, if you don't want to even do that, then you can just catch me on Fiverr. Fiverr, I just do straight up commissions. They'll be normally traditional and original and, mailed out and everything like that. So if you want to have like an original piece you want to hang up on a wall or something, I'm super flattered if that's the case. And for anyone and everyone else, if you'd like to support, I'm G-Mr. Drew on all social media. Follow, like, and subscribe. Any and all support is appreciated. So you can catch me on Instagram. I'm posting twice a day there, and as well as Twitter. But Twitter, I'm more like just sharing. I never got on the Twitter bus to really know how to use it well, so I don't. But I'm always sharing things and retweeting things and quoting things and things that inspire me. So maybe you'll find dope artists, the ones that, I look at, and, maybe that helps you. Because if you like my stuff, you'll probably like theirs. And other than that, it hasn't been too much time since the previous stream. And, like I said, I did a bit of yoga, and I was watching the David Finchs as they were studying an artist, and that video has since ended, and I started another video of one that was just recorded like an hour ago, where he was studying Travis Charest. I'm not familiar with this artist, but again, I'm just into David Finch. I like watching him work and things like that, and he's always dropping bombs and dropping facts and all that other stuff. So, I have that playing in the background. There's only about half hour left in the video that I'm watching before we jump into a new channel that I'm not familiar with, so I'll name them when we get to it. But it's like a 2-hour video of, or 3-hour video of a Frazetta and a Frazetta art breakdown. So me being a huge Frazetta fan, you guys know I did a bunch of Frazetta studies as far as like fur loincloths and things like that go. So here's that page. So, and I'm always into Frazetta and stuff. So yeah, after I saw that, I was like, let me check that out as well. So I'm gonna have that playing in the background, and if I have anything to talk about, I'll talk about it. But if not, you know how this goes, man. I'm just gonna be going, and feel free to chime in whenever you want. Let me adjust this camera Starting a new page. How exciting.
A line of beauty, and then it stops in a hook. And yeah, just drawing this kind of thing and picking up some of those kinds of shapes from the kind of artist. I mean, Travis is just such uh, a great artist at doing this kind of thing. You'll you'll start to pick this kind of thing up. I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again when I say that, but what do you do?
So, create some artists against. What was the name of the class? David did a full-length tutorial on drawing backgrounds in perspective. You can get on his website, davidfinchart.com. If you go to the, I believe it's the courses section, you'll get a link to Dave's Gumroad. Maybe Russ can post Dave's website in the chat, and then also Dave's Gumroad. Yeah, it's an amazing tutorial. Learns a lot from that.
Yeah, and look, in terms of just something that's free. Also, I've got a 2 videos on drawing backgrounds in 1 point perspective on YouTube, and so much of the same kind of stuff gets covered. So if you're a little reluctant to spend money on a course, which I certainly understand, I would recommend just looking at that YouTube video or those 2, and I hope that they would be helpful. They're pretty extensive.
Yeah, Dave did 1 point. I did a 1 point, and he did another one in drawing characters in basically the scene with perspective, which would be 2 point. I think he did there. So there's definitely very good tutorials there.
Yeah, not really detail in that one though. The drawing characters in a scene was more of a that's what I need to do next, Eric. And I'm getting a little sick of drawing tight pencil tutorials. I need to just do something where I can just do quick little crafty sketches.
That'd be good.
So the last video that I just had out was a compilation of the first 2, and this is what Eric was talking about with these lines kind of together. This is different for me. As much as I've looked at this face, I don't think I've ever actually tried this directly. This kind of an effect. So it's interesting for me. And I don't really know how I kind of miss this. I just never really tried it. But yeah, it was just the questions like some of these just compiled into a video. So that was the last tutorial video. The next one, I'm going to do an actual tutorial, Eric. So I'm doing another one. It's coming up. And then I think I'm going to switch through. I was really thinking, you know what, just for the summer, just because it's, we've got a lot of stuff going on, but I'm already antsy about not having another tutorial up, so I'm going to do it.
Okay. So do you know what it's on yet, or?
No.
Okay.
I was looking, so Eric sent me a list 2 months ago or so of a whole bunch of things. So the problem is there's so many good ideas on there that I'm like, oh, now I'm torn. But it'll be one of those.
Cool.
I love it when they get quiet.
And so, yeah,
So artist.
this is really just gonna, I'm gonna kind of continue that effect around these little shapes here too. Very interesting kind of way of, and he's not just going circular, like he's really kind of breaking these up and keeping it jagged. Otherwise, it would start to look very strange. As it is, I don't know that Travis. I can't think of a time he's done exactly this anywhere else either. It's very unusual for him, or what my experience of Travis feels like it's unusual. It's probably not. I just didn't really pick up on it. And so I've got some of these lines kind of defined in, and and now just using them to kind of inform some more lines. He's got some lines coming across this way. But as you detail, it starts to inform the rest of the detail that you put in. So you don't have to worry about really overly detailing and being super clean with one tiny little area. You can add just a little bit more and then a little bit more, and you kind of layer it on. And Travis did all this with pencil. This is all, once again, inked by a rich friend. And his pencils were incredible. And by the way, it's coming off the page here. His pencils were incredibly tight. So all of these line weights, everything was very nicely established, which I'm sure took him quite a while to do. Now, for these shapes here, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can really, actually I think you can see it pretty well, but his connection points, he goes thicker. And so he's got a thin line and as it connects to another line. So I'm going to draw a line in here, and then a bit of a connection here. I'm going to go thicker here, and thicker here where these lines connect. And that really solidifies them. And I think that works because it's essentially like a ambient occlusion, maybe, when you get those little pockets of shadow. So he's got a bit of a thicker line here, connects to another line here, and it's, I'm copying what he has here, but really it's much more important to me to kind of get a feel for the way he's putting these lines down. It's got a bit of a thicker bit here, which is kind of connecting. Here, and I lost that shape a little. It doesn't matter. I'm just not worried about it. Or maybe I'm just saying that because I lost that shape and I'm not getting it back. There we go. Bit of just a simple line detail for the upper lip there.
This is a good question. I've been a human copy machine my whole life, and for the life of me, I can't draw anything from memory. I've copied you, Jim Lee, and others. Can you offer any advice to help me draw from my head?
Well, I'm sure you have a pretty good idea of a lot of this. So, but regardless, the only way I can answer the question is to just give you a rundown of what I know of the process.
No, wait.
And
Duh.
step one
I
is
have it right in
you
front of me.
really need to work on these kinds of figures and see if you can make these kinds of figures work and start to get dynamic on their own. And that's a whole kind of school of art, just in of itself, and do thousands of these. That will take you quite a ways. And then, and I'm sure if you're copying this, if you have a decent idea of where all the muscles go and that kind of thing, doing these kinds of studies is really well, okay. I'm talking in circles here, but I'm just going to tell you, before I started working, I did so many studies like this. Some better, some worse, some just were total disasters, but I learned from all of them. And as I did more and more, they started getting easier. And once I started working, I had enough of a basis to be able to draw a lot of my own stuff, but I still struggled a lot. And so I still would pull out books. Like I would have, this book sitting on my desk, and maybe I'm not drawing this exact face, but I'm drawing something similar, and I'm taking all kinds of things from it. So yeah, I can certainly draw on my own completely, but I find to grow and to get better, and something we did with the last couple of work-throughs, and now because we're working on detail with Travis, this is very much a detail-oriented kind of a study. I'm not doing like, let's close the book and let's just do it on our own, but it really is very, very helpful to do that. If you draw something from Jim Lee, draw it from Jim Lee, and then immediately draw it on your own afterwards, like directly afterwards. So do it twice. Do it while looking, and then do it while not looking, and see just how much you can retain.
So that's what I mean, man. Little gems like that.
Should be
I
helpful.
wish I had heard that when I was a kid. I'd probably be so much more ahead of myself than I am right now.
So you've got some kind of lines coming down here. It's like, oh, by the way, I'm sorry. We have Greg Al here. Greg Al Static Art. Sorry, Greg. He has a $2 super chat. Thank you very much. And he says, hey, Deanie, missed the post for this, but I made it. Well, I'm glad you made it. Yeah, you know what? My fault on the post. I totally forgot to post up that we had this coming. Eric actually texted about 2 hours before the start, and he said, "Are we doing this tonight? What's going on?" And yeah, I realized, oh no, I forgot to put it up. So. So I've got a few more lines here. I want to make sure again.
You know what?
Lines. I don't even need to.
It's a little close.
The point is, though, I'm going to draw a line. Here's a line. I'm going to connect another line to it, and now I just want to go thicker here, and maybe a little thicker here, just like that. I'm going to draw another line here, so I'll just go a little thicker like this, and I can get a lot of dimension just doing that. I've got these shapes are all kind of similarly sized, so you want to kind of avoid that. So I want something maybe a little smaller here, and change it up a little bit. But that's really all there is to it. And you can see I throw that pretty quickly. It's become second nature for me. It is from this stuff, and I definitely had to go through the methodical process of trying to do this slowly. And I remember when I started looking at Travis, I was drawing Cyberforce, and it destroyed my ability to meet a deadline for a little while. And then, it started getting comfortable for me again. And Tom Teacher says, I'd ask, is the criticism that you always draw the same body type when something else is required? Is it, I'm sorry, Tom, he's having a conversation. Meanwhile, I'm coming in halfway through, but James Linden has a super chat for $5. Thank you so much, James. And he says, from earlier super chat, have you ever drawn in-person life drawing sessions or just learned from photo book? I have never done life drawing. I did life painting one time with my mother. She's got a painting group. Actually, we just did some sculpting not that long ago. I need to put it up on Instagram, the sculpture that I did. It's the worst sculpture you've ever seen in your life. So I did a painting from life one time, but no, it's just not part of how I learned. But you know what? I'm not an artist. I'm a comic book artist. I never wanted to be an artist. I never would have been an artist if it weren't for comics. This is what I aspire to. Being a fine artist is something that I think I would have started drawing earlier if there were any option other than, what I would see from fine art, like sitting and copying from a model with charcoal. I remember I took art in school. I took it twice. I failed both times because I would just sit there and draw skulls. I hated it so much. I'm off the page. So yeah, what can I say? I make no bones about the fact that I'm a comic book artist doing the kind of work that I wanted to do and looking at as inspiration the kind of work that I want to do. So yeah, I think that drawing from life is great. I have a great deal of respect for it. I am completely unashamed of the fact that it's not part of my study process. For the most part, I look at it a little bit here and there for lighting. Michael Johnson Curry is here. Good to see you, Michael. He has a $10 super chat. He says, what is a good way to balance heavily detailed backgrounds and detailed characters? I'm hearing a lot of writers, editors want to see more detailed backgrounds, but it seems like a lot of the masters less so. You know what? I gotta be honest. I tend to lean toward more detailed backgrounds, and it's just something I like. And I think Travis is a really good example of the kind of ways that you can get a lot of detail, in your backgrounds without it overpowering. And that is, in a panel. I've got some. It's like an alley, and I've got some garbage. So I'm going to draw. Here's a wall of my alley. It's just going to be dark. There was a garbage can, a bit of garbage spilling out here, cans, things, whatever. And it's all, I'm going to light it kind of from here. So this side of the garbage can is going to be dark. This will be dark here. All kind of dark here. And most of this can just be kind of shadowed out. There's really not much there. But then I'll really go in and all kinds of cool detail and just have some fun with all this stuff here. And so it looks really detailed, but really there's not that much. It's mostly just shadow. And, that's really using your composition to use detail effectively. I think, in terms of classical artists that I think of when I think, how that can be done masterfully, Rembrandt, most of that picture will just swim out into shadow and just disappear.
Hell yeah.
Where he's crisp and detailed, it's so crisp, and so much so that he would actually, really raise up and get textural with the paint. And I love that. So I don't think you need to overly detail, but you need to find places, focal points where you overly detail. All right. Let's see how Eric's coming along here.
I think I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, that really came out very, very well. Can you zoom in a little bit? Would you mind?
Let me, yeah.
Daniel Barra says, just joining. Hello. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And Sheldon Martin says, I'm lost between the lines. I'm going to go back and draw this guy again. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. A couple times I think you can be very, very helpful. Yeah, you know what? That came out great. And it's a different kind of detailing than I've seen you do before.
Yeah, definitely worthwhile.
Not only that, but I just want to point out that you made it work. Like that, all that detailing looks like it's laid on there properly. Like it's working. Considering that when you started, you felt completely intimidated by it. I think.
Yeah, I think like you said, picking out bigger shapes and working small, and then working small definitely helps. Yeah.
I'm pumped. It's great.
I like something else that I like is this whole deal here that he does.
You're a little bit off the page, so now I had to zoom in, and now okay. So what was it?
It's just basically these lines that he has like this, and then crossing along the form.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a less kind of here. I'm just gonna do it on mine quickly because I know what you're talking about. So it would be like right here. He has a couple lines kind of.
Yeah.
Like that kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really nicely done. And it's a really not rendered out style. It's for Travis very simple, and for me, I tend to like to go with a million little lines. So I love seeing a lot of detail without just resorting to rendering. And I think the more you can get on your picture without it being just rendering, yeah, it can be more interesting.
Yeah, and then something else I noticed is these small little marks over here. How normally the rendering of like such. But here, if you have something dark, whatever. I mean, he's just got small little, and it just works. He just makes it work.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I don't see any rendering on his art really, as far as processing goes.
Yeah, not at this stage. This is when he was working on this stuff here. He's not. No, you know what? Actually, I'm just gonna quickly.
Oh yeah, let's do another one.
This book that I showed you guys just a minute ago, and the art in here is very, very different than what he did later on. This is already very different. Let me zoom out. Oh, and Sheldon Martin has a super chat for $10. Thank you very much, Sheldon. And he says, "Thank you so much for doing this work stream, guys. Very helpful, motivating. I'm really glad. I'm really enjoying doing these a lot, especially Travis. I'm such a big fan of. So, okay, so let me zoom out here so you can kind of see this book. But Travis was using a lot more solid black at this stage than he did before, and some of these lines, this was very different for Image Comics. These thick lines, and this is very Mobius. And actually, I really think that a lot of what he was looking at was Mobius. It really reminds me of Mobius, and it's a little hard to pick out just because he had so much of his own kind of aesthetic that went into it, that mixed with it. But
What book is this there?
It's another Wildcat. It's an earlier issue. It's issue 26, so it's like an earlier run of Wildcats. And like this kind of thing here, I mean, and this is what I'm talking about with, you know, beautiful detail and then just really nice composition is very, very simple. But because this detail is so nice and effective, it just works. And you can see up here, he's got this balcony, very detailed and clean. You don't need much to do that. Now, I unfortunately tend to not be, that clean and restrained, but and actually, at the end of this is some early Dave Johnson stuff. Some of my absolute favorite stuff. Dave Johnson, he's a phenomenal artist, phenomenal cover artist, and he was the main designer for Ben 10. And you can see a lot of that kind of design aesthetic in here. This would have been before Ben 10. Very, very cool stuff. Anyway, yeah, so I forgot what I was talking about. I have no idea what I was talking about, Eric.
I think it's about his style changing.
Right.
Might need to do some more rendering in his work.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, this issue here he changed so much, and this came out. It was a shock to me. It took me a second to kind of get used to because I was loving what he did before, and then with this stuff here, this is an earlier issue. I know it has no cover. I'm not the best in my comics. And there's a little bit more rendering in here, and you can see he's got. I don't know if you can really see it. It's a little zoomed out, but it's like a bit of an earlier kind of a form of what he went a little bit more heavy with here. And then later on, he did Wildcats X-Men, which was really, really heavily, he was inking that himself. And so he just, the rendering on it is very, very small and clean. All right. So hey, howtodrawcomics.net is here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it's just good to see you here. It says, incredible stream, Dave. Thanks for all of the useful insights. Have you got any tips for where to place your blacks to help make the composition be better? I've noticed Mark Sylvester is a master at this. You know what? I feel like you're teaming me up with that one. I really appreciate it. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna show you quickly. This is such a lesson that we all got from Mark Sylvester. So and I've done this before, but so here's a panel. I've got a guy standing here. He's happy. And, let's cross his arms. Okay, so there we go. And it's just kind of flat, And so what I can do is I can start by saying, I'm going to light it from here. So into the page this way. And so I'm not even going to worry about lighting on the actual figure because we're just talking about compositional lighting. So I'm going to cast a shadow behind him onto the wall. Just like that. And because the shadow is dark and he's light, that automatically pops him out a little bit and makes it a little bit more interesting. And then what I can do is I'm going to just do this. And I'm basically just creating a shadow over him with a kind of a triangular shape, just like this. And what this kind of represents, I mean, I could go here too. This is like a window, so you'll see this in film noir. You've got the vertical blinds through it like this. That's really what that is. You don't need to put the vertical blind kind of effect in there. It doesn't even need to come from a window. You just do this effect, and it just works. So really simple terms. I've got let's say. Here's a doorway, and the door is hanging open, and there's like a dead guy on the floor, and his gun is whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. But the point is that, and here's the wall behind. I can do the same kind of thing. So I'm gonna draw some blood coming off the guy here. Yeah, I'm totally changing what I'm doing here, but whatever. I'm gonna draw some blood here, and so the blood's gonna be light, and I'm gonna start like this. And kind of do this sort of a pattern below him. It's too small, so I'm drawing it over here so you can kind of see it. And so there you go. And it leads your eye into where that guy would be kind of laying there here. So that's what I'm thinking here. And then I want this wall to be dark behind him, but I don't want it to just be completely dark because it'll just close in. So I'm just going to do the same kind of a thing, just like that. And just use a bit of a compositional shadow up here, and I can kind of continue it up there. And you can see that immediately closes your eye. This is so small. Can you even see what I'm doing?
Yeah, see it.
Okay. And then, a bit of a crown molding up here. There you go. And yeah, just compositionally, that sort of, and now that's one thing. Just using this sort of kind of triangular cap shadow over backgrounds is really really effective. It works every time. And then the other big thing that Mark would do, and we all learned this one, is I've got a pipe here, and then a chimney behind it here, and maybe another chimney here, and another one here, and it kind of starts to get flat. Now, if I decide that this is light, I can make this one dark, and then this can be light behind it, and this can be dark. I can layer another light thing behind that, and then another dark shape behind that, and I can go back into infinity, and you can see how much it just starts to push back. That's just using layering of dark and light is so effective, and that's something I learned from Mark too. And thank you really so much. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the question. One of these days, it would actually be great to have you on the channel and talk about some things. So, it's something we should plan at some point. So Eric,
Yeah.
I'm thinking let's hold on. It is 10:09, so I think we're gonna kind of wrap it up there. I wanted to do some rocks. So thank you. Some rocks. I can't remember the word rock. So I kind of wanted to do that too, but it's getting a little bit late, so I think maybe we'll kind of leave that one off. And really, so much of what we were doing with rocks really comes down to this effect right here. It's very much the same, and you can see it. Let's find the one that would all through here, the way he approaches this stuff. It's very similar. And then the one other thing that he would do, and I'm just gonna, let's just do this as a quick, quick mini tutorial, but something he does really well. I love this. He does these kinds of divots, and really all it is you just draw a shape like this, and then draw your shadow down inside it, just like this, and then you can draw a shadow where it kind of curves under, and you'll see this on people's work so much for like bullet holes, that kind of thing. It just really works rather than drawing like the whole shape, just drawing that shadow shape, and then this kind of thing here. So I'm gonna do a whole bunch of that, but I'm not gonna keep you guys up all night doing that. So I think we'll wrap it up there with this space here. That was actually quite a bit to cover. I enjoyed that kind of more than I thought I would. I don't know about you, Eric.
No, yeah, absolutely enjoyed this. Definitely learned so many things, and that's the whole goal. So.
It really is. Well, and hopefully all of you guys kind of got something out of that too, and hopefully a few of you have been drawing along with us, and that's where you really, really get a lot out of this. So that's going to be it for this one. The next one we have the same time next week, Sunday at 8 o'clock, and we will have the masterful and very nice to come on the show, Ariel Olivetti. We'll be painting together.
And our teacher actually asks before we go, what will we need for the Olivetti screen? Acrylic paint. We're going to be painting Bane, as David mentioned earlier. So you definitely want your paint that you're going to need for skin tone, and yeah. I don't know if I should paint. I don't know if I should post supplies, David, or what should we do there? Because we can post colors, but it's really up to. There's so many ways, to paint skin tones. So it's kind of difficult to suggest certain colors, but.
There we go. I'm sorry, I trailed off. I was trying to figure this thing out. I switched cameras. It didn't work because I didn't have my. All right. I'm sorry. I totally missed that fight with this thing.
Tom Teeter was just asking, what we need for the stream. Acrylic paint. As far as colors go, it's kind of hard to suggest different colors because skin tone is kind of
Right. What I would say is, you want just basically a basic palette. I think black and white, blue, and I know Ariel Olivetti, I think, uses ultramarine blue. I think that's right, Eric?
I'm not quite sure. As a matter of fact, it's one of the questions I'm gonna
Okay.
guess. And my also Intone uses red, orange, blue, and then red, orange, blue, and white for the lighter
Right.
skin.
So yeah, just working with some primaries, you'll be able to mix most of what we have. I think yellow ochre is a really good one to have. Burnt sienna and um, burnt umber, and yeah, that's so basically just a basic standard kind of a painting palette. We'll have some colored pencils too. I think colored pencils will be limited to just black and white. And if they aren't, I do apologize, but that's all I ever really use. So, I'll be learning something if they're not. We'll see. Um,
As far as paper goes, Dave and I have been enjoying the Strathmore mixed media as being great to work on.
it has been, yeah. Yeah, it's been working really well. So yeah, there you go. That's gonna be it for this one. Thank you everyone so much for coming and drawing with us. Hopefully you were drawing, and if not, hopefully you'll give this a try later on. And thanks for spending time with us. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. Great.
All right, thank you.
All right, so let's give this next channel a shout out because I don't think I've watched them before. Frazetta and what he did to make his figures.
Linked together to form one big ship.
What's it called? Frazetta and what he did to make his figures and compositions great. 3-hour long video by Online Art Academy.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another one of my videos. This again is a longer video because I want to show you a lot of things that I just can't cram into a 10 or 15-minute video. Therefore, my videos are really intended for the serious student of art who's able to watch longer videos.
Serious
They're
students.
interested. They want to learn as much as they can. Since this is a very long video, not the kind of art instruction video that you might be used to seeing, such as 10 or 20 or 30-minute videos. Therefore, you may not want to watch the entire video in one session. You can, of course, stop the video anytime you want.
Yeah, I certainly won't be streaming for 3 hours straight, so if you're interested in it, go check out the Online Art Academy on YouTube.
Without interruption, if you can. The video is so very long because Frazetta accumulated an extraordinary amount of knowledge of picture making over the course of his long career as an artist. Therefore, so much knowledge, and I can't give you all the knowledge he knew, can't be put into a 10, 15, 20-minute video or even an hour video. I paint paperback book covers. I'm an illustrator. If you're not familiar with me, I also used to do the art instruction videos for some of the major magazines like Imagine FX and Advanced Photoshop.
Okay. Okay, this guy is somebody, yo.
School, I have an online art course called the Complete Illustration Art Course, and it's for those of you who want to become illustrators in the tradition of the great illustrators of the past. I'm going to show you a photo of one of the great illustrators of all time and the founder of the famous art school, and here he is. His name is Albert Dorn.
Albert Dorn, he got some eyebrows on him.
Different artist, and this artist is Frank Frazetta.
I recognize him.
What do these two artists have in common? They're both great artists, and they both knew this: how to draw. They were both masters of drawing. If you want to become an illustrator, or a concept artist for that matter, you will need to know how to draw.
Oh yeah.
Just like Dorn, Frazetta was an extraordinarily brilliant artist. This drawing by Frazetta that you see here was one of his earlier drawings.
Oh yeah.
In
Phantom,
his early
bro.
drawings, he really didn't know yet how to make good shadow shapes. Why? Well, because in this example, what he's doing with these shadow shapes here is he's separating them and spotting them. See, that shape is not attached to any other shape. This one is by itself. That's by itself. That's by itself. By itself. By itself. They're not linked, in other words. He didn't know at this time that good shapes result from linking shapes. See how spotted those darks look, those shadow shapes? I'm going to show you another example of his earlier work. And here again, you can see this spotting of the shadow shapes and not linking them. So this shadow shape is separated from other darks, like the dark of his hair and the dark shadow on the lake there and the dark shadow on that volcano. And this dark is not linking to anything. So these are separate darks.
Hell yeah.
And because of that,
You know what? I am going to pause that for a second just to say I really like these, man. I like the dynamics that's going on with this. I wasn't sure, you know, you know how it goes, man. I never know what I'm doing in these videos. So then when I find out what it is and then I start doing stuff, it's like, oh shit, that's what's up. So yeah, this guy kind of like almost in a dive bomb position where his head is down here and his feet are up there. Hopefully that's clear. The only thing that's not coming in super clear just yet is this arm here, because the arm is in with the following suit with the leg. So you have the arm and then the leg going behind it. And then you got his other leg back here, which is some good stuff happening. Um, oh, hell yeah. So I'm just checking it out on the screen because on the screen I could see it differently than when it's like just sitting right in front of me. And yeah. Let's see this and this. So yeah, he has these fur sleeves that are really getting in the way of rendering out his back here and getting that foreshortening down. But yeah, super dope, man. All right. I wasn't sure if I was gonna be able to pull that off. Now I don't know if I did or not, but but it's something decent. Like if he's wearing this, but he's like upside down there. He got his hat flying off. You can see his braid underneath. Anyways, let's continue with this guy talking about Frazetta's blocking in shadows. And what he's talking about specifically is actually something I keep thinking about whenever I worked on it. When I was working on Frazetta's sketches here. Um, I made note of him combining the fur, blacking out the fur, with blacking out the shadows, and how all of it combined to create these really odd shapes. And I was like, for a second, I was like struggling to try to capture it. This one does it the most. Like this is the one, and again, it's another upside down figure where his knees are up here and his neck is here. You see one arm flying, two arms flying. But yeah, like when he's combining like shading, like shadows with tone, or yeah, I guess that would be it. Just combining shadows with tone. So a dark tone with just regular shadows, these didn't have it so much. I don't know about any other ones, but I started noticing it. Yeah, this one has it a lot too. The famous Conan painting, just all these shadows, and then mixing in like the fur. It was all hidden in there, and he certainly figured something out by that point. But yeah, I remember specifically working on this one and being like, "Holy shit, this guy, he combined so much shit." And that goes along with what David Finch was just talking about in the last video with studying other artists. And that's the guy whose video I'm watching now. He's talking about how he's blocking in shapes, but mostly for shade. But it's specifically a thunder ink with the shadows in the armpits and also the shadows in the fur that he's wearing.
And now
Funny
it's
enough.
unified in terms of shadow shapes.
Ooh, let's
If
go.
Frazetta had done something like this, for example, adding a better light and shadow pattern and connecting the shadow shapes like this,
Oh shit. This guy's actually improving that.
this would have made a more unified shadow shape and a more interesting shadow shape.
Holy shit.
When you have one shape like this, one shape like that, let's say, that shape can be made even more interesting when it is linked to another shape like that. And also in this version here, there's a better light and shadow pattern. You know in which direction the light is coming, where the shadow side is.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
because of that, there's also a greater feeling of a more three-dimensional form. But this linking of the shadow shapes is very important to create a more unified and interesting shape, which of course is something that Frazetta learned later on, and his figures got better and better and better the more he learned about how to create these more interesting shadow shapes, as well as all the other things that he learned about to apply to his figures.
Here, let's do one more.
He didn't know this stuff right away.
I'm loving this fur
He had to
jacket right
learn
now.
what we all do. No one's born with this knowledge. You had to learn all of this as well. You can see all of these things in his great figures. Here's another one of his earlier drawings that he did, and here again you can see this spotting that's taking place and a lack of connection of the shadow shapes or the darks. So the dark of her hair is not connected here, and that shape is breaking up by that light shape that has been placed into it. There is some linking here going on, but I'm not sure how well he really understood linking at this stage. See, this dark of his leg is linking with the shadow on her leg. So there is some linking going on here, coming around like that and down like that, but all the rest is pretty much just spotted all over the place, which weakens the drawing. Therefore, it doesn't provide it with really good shapes.
And he's talking about his really early sketches too, which makes sense. I'm sure he's gonna, long video, gonna like break down.
Learn more and more about these aspects of figure drawing, and he was able to get them into his drawings. His drawings got better and better and better, but he had to learn this over time. Granted, Frazetta seems to have been able to pick up things rather quickly, learn rather quickly. And so after he learned all of these things and how to create these good shapes by linking shapes, he went from this to this. And what a huge difference there is.
Yeah.
This drawing clearly appears to be one that was done at a later stage in his development as an artist. And you can see the big difference between this drawing and these two that I showed you. Just compare them. And I think you can clearly see that this one appears to be the better one. The one that looks more visually appealing than the other two. Here, it looks like he knows a lot more about how to create good shapes than he did in these earlier drawings. You see what a big difference it can make when you know how to create good shapes? And one of those aspects of good shapes, as you can see here, is linking. Here he links all of these darks together like that into one big dark shape, and around like that, and to where the arm is there. But he doesn't link all of them. This dark shape, and that one, and this one, they don't connect to the other shapes. They're detached from them, and he learned about the importance of some shapes being detached and not necessarily connecting every single shape. What else makes for good shapes? It's this. Yes, all of that is part of good shapes. And you can find these features of good shapes within Frank Frazetta's great drawings and paintings.
Oh yeah,
Now you might be thinking, well,
the triangle.
that can't be. All of this just to make a good shape? Well, yes.
That one looks a little more like a diamond shape, but yeah, he does a lot of triangles.
You know about what makes good shapes. What I'm doing here is I'm introducing you to these various features or characteristics that are part of good shapes. You've probably seen videos in which the artist might mention something about asymmetrical shapes, or shape language, or clear silhouette shape, but you probably haven't seen a video in which the artist lists all of the features of what makes a really good shape. So therefore, I went ahead and I listed them here. Learn a lot more about these
two different
features of good shapes
dimensions.
than what I can go into here. But I
Obliques
will
and
be pointing
shape.
out some things that Frank is
Irregularity.
doing with his shapes. He
Shape
is designing
language.
the shapes. And when you design shapes, you apply these features of what makes good shapes.
Wow. Clear silhouette.
Frank knew all of these. And how do I know that he knew them? Well, because you can see them in his shapes. And you'll find these features of good shapes not just in Frank Frazetta's paintings and drawings, but in all really good illustrations in which the artist applies these features to his or her shapes. A good shape has a clear silhouette. When you look at Frank's drawing, you can see that there is a clear silhouette, and that's why you can tell what's going on just in the silhouette shape itself. Here's what it looks like in silhouette. You can make out what's going on here just by that shape alone. So that's one of the most important features or aspects of a good shape. Make a clear silhouette.
Yep.
Now, another important feature of a good shape is that the shape is asymmetrical. So in Frank's drawing here, for example, this wolf, that shape is asymmetrical. If I drop a vertical down like that side of the shape is different from that side. So there's asymmetry here, and the same goes for the figure as well. This side of the figure is different from this side of the figure. So he's applying asymmetry. Now there's also linking going on, which I already covered. So that right there is another feature of a good shape. Linking shapes. And now I want to move on to this. Shape language, which is another important feature of good shapes. And when you look at Frazetta's drawing here, what shape language do you think he is using? There are only basically three kinds. There are the circular shapes, the angular shapes, and the blocky shapes. And by the way, keep your shapes simple like this. Don't make shapes like that, where you have a really busy, noisy edge to the shape like that. That's an ugly shape. It's not a simple shape like this. If you have a simple shape like that, then you can easily and quickly tell as to what the shape language is, what the character of the shape is, in other words. So looking at Frazetta's shapes here, looking at the contour, it doesn't look like that. The contour is more simplified, like what you see here or here. So therefore, it's easier to tell what kind of shape language is being used here. So over here, for example, where the black shape is, that contour looks to me like it's curved. And over here, these are more organic shapes. Curving shapes are organic shapes, and the same over here. I'm looking at the edge as being simple, like you see here, a clean, simple edge, not like this. So to me, it looks like Frazetta is using curving shapes here. In addition, your shape should have a dominant character to it. So these shapes here, they have a dominant character, which I already mentioned. There's the dominance of the curving shape, dominance of the angular shape, and the dominance of the blocky shape. If I made a shape like this, there's no dominance of character shape here. Why? Well, because part of the shape is circular and the other part is angular. They're two equal in size. So to have a dominant character within the shape, there needs to be more of one kind of shape than the other. So let's say I just have a little bit of the curving shape, and then the rest is more angular like that. Now there is a dominance of character. There's more of the angular and less of the curving shape. So that's what's meant by dominant character. Applying this kind of contrast within a shape, that adds more interest to a shape, because the shape has more variety than if you just made the shape all angular or all curving. Although you can do that, of course. Another important feature of good shapes, which is shape branching. Now you may know this by a different name. Different artists will use different names to describe the same thing. Like for example down here, simple and complex. But there are other names to describe this, like passive and active. So different artists will use different names, as I said. So branching is something that can be seen clearly here in the arms of this character. And when there is branching, there is also this irregularity. I'm going to turn the painting into black and white so that the color doesn't distract attention from the shapes. And I'm going to enlarge this section where his arms are. So in this close-up, I'll be able to point out the idea of shape branching. And in addition to there being irregularity in shape branching, there's also going to be a simple and a complex side to the shape. I'm going to outline the shapes found in the arm like this. Coming around like that to where the tricep muscle is, and around here like this. And then the bottom of the arm down like that. So what you're seeing here, see this irregularity? That's the branching. And you see the same thing over here. These shapes, they're branching, one shape is branching from another, and then the bottom of the arm, that's where the simple side is. And then where the branching is occurring, or the irregularity, that's the complex side. See how these shapes here and here, they're coming out of the larger shape. So it's something like this, where you have a larger shape, which you see here, and then from that larger shape, there are other shapes that are extending out from that shape to give definition to the muscles. And it looks like the shapes are branching. one shape from another, like the branches in a tree. So that's where that idea of branching comes from. And you can see that that's what Frazetta is doing here with these muscles. You can clearly see how one shape is extending out from another shape, just like what you see here. And the reason for that is because this is a way through which you can indicate the muscles. And you see this done a lot in comic book art. I'm going to separate these shapes and show you what they look like. You see, now you can clearly see these shapes and this idea of branching of shapes. And these different shapes, they're all linked. And here you can clearly see the irregular side of the shape and the simple side of the shape. So Frazetta uses this idea of branching a lot in the shapes. Now, I don't know if Frank thought of this as shape branching, but it's something that can clearly be seen in his shapes. If you've come across this, you may know it by a different name, since different artists will use different names to describe the same thing.
Yeah, like me, because I don't know how to describe anything.
But there's no time for that. Frazetta's art contains a wealth of knowledge of what makes great pictures. There's so much that can be learned from him that there's no way that one video is going to give you all that knowledge that he gained over the years of painting and drawing. Much has been said about Frazetta's art, but much more can be said. In Frazetta's paintings, you can see this, abstract pattern shapes. His interpretation of the subject is not completely literal, although you can make out, of course, what you see here. It has a certain amount of the literate, but it also has a certain amount of abstract pattern shapes. And it is this quality of abstraction in his shapes that helps to give his paintings and drawings an emotional quality. It wouldn't be there if the shapes were not more abstract. So, a shape becomes abstract when you remove the detail, when you simplify the shape.
I need some water.
It
Shit.
no longer has a more literal appearance, in other words. So it's something like this, for example, and doing this in real time really quick. So as you can see, there's no detail here. It's just a simple, dark shape. This is an abstract shape. It doesn't have any literal elements to it where you can identify what this is, what the subject is. Could be anything. Now, in Frazetta's painting here, you can see that same sort of idea that you see here. Where is it? Well, right here. That dark shape, and even down here, all of this is more abstract, although you can tell what's going on here, but it's not very literal, it's not very detailed. And so all of this is more abstract, coming around like this, you see, that dark shape. Because there is no detail, hardly any detail there, it becomes an abstract shape, like this. And this abstraction of shapes, creating these abstract pattern shapes, is what helps to give his paintings an emotional quality that wouldn't be there if he was too literal in every part of his painting. Here, you can see that he's more literal. But down here, he's being more abstract, losing a lot of detail, something like what you see here in my example. And this, like I said, helps to give his paintings an emotional quality and an appeal that wouldn't be there if everything was too literal, too detailed, too descriptive. These abstract shapes help to give some mystery to the painting because you can't make out everything that's going on here or here or here. Things are left out, made more simple, in other words, more abstract like this. And because he makes everything down here more abstract, less detailed, and places more detail up here, that's where you're going to look more than any other place. That becomes the area of focus or center of interest. If Frank had added more detail down here, the same amount that he has up there, then all of this down here would detract attention away from what's really important, which is that part of the painting. So he keeps the bottom simple and more abstract, while the top of the painting is more detailed. And Frazetta gives greater definition to the upper part than he does for the lower part of the painting, where the lower part appears more obscure looking compared to the upper part. Now watch what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to make this shape more literal. That is, you'll be able to tell what that shape is by me adding all of this detail here and the light and shadow pattern. Now you don't see as much of that abstract shape because of all of the detail that I've added and the tonal variations. So this is a more literal approach where the abstract isn't as important as getting the detail in there. But as soon as I remove the detail, then it becomes more abstract. And this is the kind of abstraction, as I pointed out to you, that you find in Frank Frazetta's work, but it's not exactly to this extreme. You can still make out certain details, even within the abstraction. So it's not completely abstract. Like you see here, you can still make out that there are rocks here, and that there's a shield here, and even here, the shadows. You can still make out a certain amount of detail. Some tonal variations are introduced. It's not a strict abstract shape or a more graphic shape. And those slight variations of tone can help to give some form or feeling of form even to the more abstract shapes so that they don't look completely flat. But this idea of more abstract pattern shapes can be seen in many of the later illustrations by such great illustrators like Bernie Fuchs or Bob Peak, for example. They seem to have gotten more abstract.
Let's see, what's the, how long have we been going? It's got to be like an hour, right? Yeah.
Probably because they realized that greater emotional expression is possible.
Let's see. That's enough with that.
Focus or emphasis on the abstract.
Move on to this one.
In addition, I should add that video shapes become more abstract. They also become more impressionistic. The approach is not to show so much detail as to give an impression.
I got this.
And you can see this kind of abstraction and impressionism in Bernie Fuchs's great painting that you see here. These shapes are more abstract. All of this, even on her clothing here. And they look like they've been freely painted in. And therefore, because of this more impressionistic approach and abstract patterns of shapes, this painting has a strong, powerful mood or emotional expression that wouldn't be possible if Bernie had painted this subject in a much more literal way, with lots more detail. As you get away more and more from overloading your paintings or drawings with detail, and
there we go.
you focus more on creating abstract shapes, your paintings and drawings will gain in greater emotional expression. That is, the mood will become much more powerful. And here's another Bernie Fuchs painting in which, again, he uses more abstract shapes. A more impressionistic style is the result, and a powerful mood You see this abstraction here, even in the clothing. But the shapes are kept more simple and not a lot of detail are put in, like in the hair here, you see? Just a simple abstract dark shape. That's when the painting gains in emotional power. What a beautiful illustration this is. The whole painting has more of a sketch-like look to it, a looseness. And you get the feeling that the artist really loved doing this painting and didn't struggle with it. Although that may not be the case, he may have had to struggle greatly with this. But that's not the impression you get when you look at the painting. It has that more spontaneous look to it. Now here's another illustration by David Finchs. Although this is not the finished painting, this is more of a rough sketch. He used this to work out what the composition of the characters are, and in this rough sketch you can clearly see more abstract-like shapes that he used to plan his composition with. So all of this is all more abstract, and the shapes are all linked, the darks are linked together. Remember, that's one of the features of a good shape. So all this is more abstract and loose, and that's of course because he was working out what the composition should be. And the characters, what they should look like, what their pose should be. But he works out all of this in more abstract terms, more abstract-like shapes, simple abstract-like shapes. In this painting, he is using abstract shapes. So where are they? Well, you can see them right here. All of this is more abstract. You don't see a lot of detail, or a lot of tonal variations. That is an abstract shape. And back here, where those figures are, they're all linking together like this into one large overall abstract shape. Like that. There's a little bit of detail, a little bit of color variation.
That's what's happening.
The shapes don't look rapid like. You see? Little bits of detail, little tonal variation here and there. The shapes shouldn't look solid, completely solid. Why? Well, because of bounce light. Some of the bounce light gets into the shadows, and therefore the shadows contain lighter values. So there's some tonal variation within the shadow shapes to keep them from looking completely solid. And I'm going to enlarge a section of that painting so you can see these abstract shapes.
That's one of my favorite paintings too, man. I think it's like one of the Mars ones, John Carter of Mars paintings. It's all green and red. It's with homie and the chick, and then there's like flags and a little bit of an army in the background and stuff like that.
He keeps it very simple, more abstract, and thereby this painting has a certain emotional quality to it. And mystery, because you can't really make out everything that's going on in those shadow shapes. So those shadow shapes are more abstract, but not everything is more abstract. As you can see here, other parts of the painting have more detail, like her, the head here, and this guy back there. But most of the detail is on her. So he's applying this principle of simple and complex. The complex is where the detail is. So those parts are the more literal parts of the painting, while the rest is the more abstract part. So there's this beautiful combination of the more abstract with the more literal. Just another example of his powerful compositions. This is another great painting by Frazetta. And if you're a Frazetta fan, you've probably seen this painting before.
Oh yeah.
It's more of a monochromatic color scheme that he's using here, and he's also using this alternating light and dark rhythm. Do you see it in this painting? When you hear about rhythm in these art construction videos, usually all you hear about is linear rhythm. But there are so many other kinds of rhythm also that you need to know about. And Frazetta obviously knew about other kinds of rhythms than just linear rhythms. He knew about this, rhythms of light and dark. A tonal rhythm of light and dark can be seen in this great painting. Can you see where it is? Let me point it out in case you're not seeing it. This, of course, is dark. But then this is light. But then it alternates and changes back to dark, you see here. And then it changes back to light. And then it changes back to a dark tone. So what you see here is what I'm showing you over here. An alternating of light and dark. Setting up an alternating rhythm. And this is one of the major reasons why this painting has such great visual appeal. It's because of this principle of alternation. Alternation is one of those important principles of design that you need to know about and be able to apply to your compositions.
Damn.
This is just another example of his superb compositions in which you find these kind of principles of design. He had to learn them. Someone had to point these things out to him. He wasn't born with this knowledge. He didn't have some kind of mysterious instinct that enabled him to come up with these things. No, he had to learn these things just like the rest of us. So if you're a Frazetta fan, I'm sure you've seen this painting before, but has anyone ever told you what the composition is here? What he did to make this painting so effective? Well, one of the reasons, and this is a big reason why this is so effective, this figure expressing the emotion here. How does he do that? What does he do? Well, as you can see, the arms are in a curve like this. You see? Pointing up like that. Now, to strengthen that gesture, what he does is he repeats it. Where does he repeat it? Well, right here in the background. See, coming up like that. He repeats that same gesture, thereby strengthening this gesture of the outstretched arms upward like that. And even here, where the eagle is, you see there's like a slight curve like that, repeating that larger curve and the curve of the arms. So he's strengthening that pose, that gesture, which has a powerful emotional effect on the viewer. And when you look over here, for example,
So many
there's
emotions.
also a curve coming around like that and into the wings of the eagle, like that. Okay? And the arms. And this, along with additional elements, helps to express the emotion of this character in a much more powerful way than if Frazetta hadn't done this. When you look at this figure here, this woman standing here, she is composed of these rhythmic lines around the stomach, like this, you see? And even the arms, they make this curve.
Oh yeah, I love that painting.
So she's made up of all of these rhythmic lines.
Chick in a Jungle.
Now to strengthen that idea of her being made up of these rhythmic, sensuous, graceful lines, to strengthen her pose, in other words, what Frazetta does, he repeats those curves within the setting within which the figure has been placed. And thereby, he strengthens the pose. So, where are those rhythmic lines? Well, you can see them. They're fairly obvious. There's a large rhythmic line there. There's an undulating rhythmic line here. And there's a curve going around there. There's a curve here. And even here. And here. So, the environment repeats the curves in the figure, or you could say the curves in the figure are repeated within the environment, the setting. Illustrators use the word setting concept artists use the word environment. So you see, it's that same idea that I pointed out to you here, which means that something within the figure, the gesture of the figure, the lines, the rhythms found within the figure, are repeated within the setting or environment. And that's what you see here. So repeating those rhythmic, graceful, sensuous lines within the figure, within the setting, just makes her look even more sensuous, more feminine. So in this painting by Frazetta, here again, you can see this idea of the rhythms that are set up within the figure. They are repeated somewhere else within the environment or the setting, and in this case it happens to be these creatures that are attacking him. And as you can see here, they make these curves, which is exactly what you find within the pose of the figure here. So what Frazetta is doing, he is echoing the curving rhythms within the figure, within these creatures. So he's repeating the rhythms set up within the figure, within the creatures. And there is this circular movement that's a frame, and then another frame. So it's a frame within a frame, drawing attention to the figure, and these circles, they have this circular movement around and around, just like his arms are flying around and around. And like the creatures flying around and around him. And because of that, the circle becomes the design theme for this composition. Because it best expresses the action that is taking place. This circular movement, this encirclement.
Damn, why do I have the...
character.
Why do I want to watch Lego Batman so much right now? It just hit me like, yo, you gotta go watch Lego Batman. I've seen that movie a few times. I own it, so I love it.
Design themes are something that I don't see a lot of in many illustrations, and because of that, the illustrations lack the kind of expressive power that they would have if the artist had known about design themes and applied them to his or her illustrations. This circle becomes a symbol, because a design theme can be a symbol that will help you to express in a more powerful way what you want to say in your illustration. In each of the paintings that I analyzed that Frazetta did, I could see that he applied a design theme. Now, I don't know if he thought of what he did in terms of a design theme that he was applying. He may have thought of this differently. He may have had a different terminology that he used. But he definitely applied certain lines and shapes that can be thought of as design themes, such as in the first painting that I analyzed, where I talked about the curve that he used. And then in the other painting of the woman, he used the rhythmic line, or S curve, and in this painting, he uses the circle. These lines and rhythms can definitely be seen in his compositions. So, one of the important things to remember when you are designing the figure composition, applying rhythms and action and gesture, what you set up within the figure, those rhythms, that gesture, needs to be echoed or repeated within the setting, just like what I showed you. And if you're able to do that, you're going to end up with a powerful composition, expressing what you want to say in a much more effective and powerful way than if you didn't do that. This way, your illustration will gain in expressive power. And this design theme can be a symbol, such as I talked about. And the great illustrator and one of the guiding faculty members for the Famous Artist School, Robert Fawcett, said that he thinks you shouldn't even start a composition until you have found a symbol upon which you can base that composition. But sometimes you will find a symbol in your rough sketches or thumbnail sketches that you do. As you work on your composition in those rough sketches, a symbol might emerge from that, upon which you can then build your composition. The more examples you see of how other artists have used design themes, the better your understanding of this is going to become, and the more likely it will be that you too will be able to apply design themes to your own compositions. But it's not as easy as you might think. Now, I've talked about design themes in some of my other YouTube videos that you might have seen, and if you have seen those videos, then that will give you an even better understanding of design themes. Now, if you're thinking, well, I should be able to find more information on design themes when I'm looking through these art instruction videos on composition, well, unfortunately, you're probably not going to find anything on design themes. What you usually find is the same old stuff over and over, like the rule of thirds. I don't know how many times I've heard that. And this is really unfortunate because design themes will offer you a way to bring greater order to your compositions. And as I mentioned, greater expressive power as well. These are the most important things when it comes to composition. What many art students don't know is that there is a hidden underlying geometric structure to a composition. And that underlying structure is built with simple geometric shapes. Now, I can't go into that a lot here, but I want you to be aware of that fact. And in many of the paintings by Frazetta, he bases his paintings or his compositions on simple compositional shapes, especially this one here, which is, of course, the triangle. And in this painting, you can see that he bases this composition on the triangle. Now, these compositional shapes are usually more hidden. They're not that easily recognizable all the time. Sometimes they're more obvious, but they're also more hidden or implied geometric shapes as well. So, for example, the more obvious triangle shape here is, of course, this. But there's another one that's more hidden or implied, which is this one. And coming down like that.
Yep.
So,
Oh, that's my favorite painting in the world.
Triangle within a triangle, like that. And when you base your compositions on a triangle, the composition will look more dynamic because the triangle.
He's talking about the first Conan painting, you know, the Conan painting, standing on top of the pile, fire in the background, chick on his leg.
One of the reasons why many of Frank's paintings or compositions are based on the triangle. You see, Frank knew about this underlying structure to a composition, and he knew that a composition is based on simple geometric shapes, like the triangle, the circle, or the square, or rectangle. And you can combine these simple geometric shapes, like triangle, with the square, for example. You can even add a circle. And then you place your subject matter more or less within those underlying geometric shapes. But you try not to make them look too obvious. So what's the purpose of using these kind of simple underlying geometric shapes? Why use them? I've seen a lot of art instruction videos in which the artist doesn't talk about this, or if he or she does, it's just mentioned briefly, and no clear explanation is given. And the student is left with scratching their head. So why use these shapes? Well, let me just give you a quick example here. So let's say I place a shape here, 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 here. This is what art students do. They scatter their shapes all over the place because they haven't learned the importance of this kind of underlying geometric structure to a composition. So, in order to bring order to the composition, that is to organize all of these more scattered shapes, you can place them within some kind of simple geometric shape, like I did over here. You bring them all together, group them, place them together. You can end up with a geometric shape when you just start adding shapes together, grouping them like this, overlapping them, and you end up with some kind of underlying geometric shape. Or you can begin by establishing first a simple geometric shape like the triangle, like what Frazetta does. And then you bring all of your shapes together into that underlying geometric shape like this. And that organizes them so that they don't look scattered all over the place. That's why you use these simple underlying geometric shapes, to bring the shapes together, to organize them so that they don't look like they're flying apart, like they're scattered all over the place. And then I could add, let's say, an oval back here, and let's say there's a city back here. So the city is made up of a lot of different shapes, and I'm placing those city shapes more or less within that oval that I established. I'm bringing order to those shapes that make up that city in the background there. Well, this is rough, of course, but I think you get the idea what I'm trying to tell you here. There is, of course, a lot more that can be said about this underlying structure to a painting that is made up of simple geometric shapes, but I can't really go into all those additional things that can be said about.
Damn, I kind of missed what he was just talking about. Looks kind of crazy.
This is how Frazetta organizes his shapes. This is what he bases his compositions on. He knows about this kind of underlying geometric structure and its importance. When you analyze Frazetta's paintings for their composition, you will find this kind of underlying geometric structure of simple shapes that bring order to all the various shapes that make up the picture or composition. Frank Frazetta was a master of figure composition. So here is a drawing by Frank Frazetta. When you are applying composition to a figure, you are applying design to that figure. And various principles that are part of composition and design. Composing a human figure is no different from composing other forms of nature. All the principles of repetition and variation, of rhythmic organization, of simplification, of consistent design and pattern are equally valid when it comes to figure composition. And Frank was great at applying these principles to his figures. His figures are rhythmically organized. Once you understand this and are able to apply it to your own figure drawings, that's when you're going to see an immense improvement in your figure drawings. The more that we know about how the figure is put together, how it works, and about these principles that I mentioned, the more convincing the figure drawings are going to be. When Frank began to work out the composition of his figures, he would begin very roughly. Here's an example of how rough Frank would begin to work out a composition.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gesture sketch.
I have a bunch of his sketches, a bunch of sketchbooks of his.
Composition doesn't just refer to an entire picture in which you have a lot of shapes and forms that you are arranging within that pictorial space. It also refers to a single individual figure. Yes, even a single figure needs to be thought of in terms of composition. Just as you design an entire picture, you design a single figure. The entire picture has composition, a single figure has composition. Normally, you don't think of a figure having composition, because all you hear about usually is the composition of the whole picture. But you never hear about the figure also having composition, that is, applying composition to a figure, which is what Frank did to his figures. He designed them, he applied composition. Also, what students don't always realize is that not just the figure has gesture, but everything has gesture, which means that animate as as well as inanimate objects, have gesture and need to be drawn initially with that in mind. You try to capture the gesture of the object, whether it is alive or not, whether it's animate or inanimate. Every single object here has gesture, or is thought of in terms of gesture. Not just the figure, but the horse and these two animals here, which might be mountain lions. I did an entire video on gesture, and I pointed out that everything has a kind of spirit of form, or gesture, as it's also referred to. But I don't think it was really understood that well, because I think that students continue to think of gesture as only being applied to figures. You have to go beyond that kind of thinking. As I still have that video at my YouTube channel on gesture, you might want to check that out. Now, one of the most important considerations when composing a figure is designing the shapes. And Frazetta was great at shape design. So where is the shape here? The shapes? Well, I'll point out this. This is the shape. And this, down to his boots, and like that. So this shape has been designed. These little pieces here, these pieces of shape, projecting out like that, were put there on purpose to make a better overall shape. So these little protrusions, as they can be called, are incidents along the edge of the shape, and they help make the shape more interesting. Watch what happens when I remove those protrusions or incidents along the edge of the shape. The shape now no longer looks as interesting.
Yeah, it's very
As
anatomical.
soon as I return them, you see, doesn't that shape now look more interesting than when they are removed like this? So these kind of incidents along the edge of the shape can help make a shape more shapely looking and therefore more interesting. See, without those incidents, that edge looks rather bland and uninteresting. But just the addition of those little shapes there, jutting out like that or protruding, helps make that edge more interesting. In this painting by Frazetta called Sun Goddess, you see a primordial priestess with arms outstretched and looking up as though she is looking up towards the gods, summoning maybe some supernatural force or deity. And with this figure, you can see the kind of body type in women that Frazetta preferred, and you can see the same body type painted over and over again in his paintings of women.
Oh yeah.
But there's also a certain body type for men as well, that he paints over and over again. In this painting, like the others that I've shown you, Frazetta is using abstract shapes. And where are they? Well, right here, for example. That is an abstract shape. Why? Well, because it's very simple and contains no detail or very little detail and almost no tonal variation. This tone is a little bit lighter than that tone. Let me turn it into a black and white, and you can see the difference. I'm going to enlarge this. See how much darker this looks compared to that. So there are slight tonal variations. It's not a completely perfect graphic shape where the tone is exactly the same everywhere. And you can see that the tone down here is a bit lighter also, and you can see a little bit of detail. So this is the kind of abstract shape that you see many times in Frazetta's shadow shapes. And these kind of abstract shapes in which there is slight tonal change and a little bit of detail here and there, but not much. But overall, it looks more abstract than realistic or literal. All of this is an abstract shape And he is linking these shapes. All of this on the rock is linked to this animal here. Then also the shadows on her are linked to the animal. But then that shape is not linked to that shape. So there's some detachment here. And you can do that. You can detach shapes, but don't detach too many. So all of this is linked. But then over here, that's separate. But the shapes are close to each other, so they don't look scattered. That part is a little too light, so it wouldn't link with the darker value. So it's more like this. Those darks are close enough to be considered linked, but this is a lighter value. And because of that, I wouldn't say that that shape is linked to the darker values. So it's more like what you see here. This is such a brilliant composition. I'm going to enlarge this. And what I want to point out is that the abstract shape that I just showed you has this more angular or straight line character to it, you see? And the rock, of course, also. Like this. You look at the edges, they're really straight lines. And because they're straight lines, like that, and between this irregularity at the edge, or a curve down here, this belongs to the angular family of shapes. But what he does, which is so brilliant, is that against this more angular shape on this creature, as well as the rock down here, he has these more curving shapes. You see? Like that. The curves in the woman, they contrast sharply with the background angular shapes. So by doing that, he accentuates the more soft and curving and sensuous lines of the woman through contrast of shape. Gives her a greater feeling of softness and femininity and grace. And of course helps her to stand out even better against the more angular background shapes because of contrast of shape.
I see.
Now these straight lines also extend over here on the part that is in the light. Brilliantly done. Now a lesser artist, I don't think would have thought of something like this, because that lesser artist didn't have this knowledge. You see, this kind of thinking is one of the reasons why Frank Frazetta's paintings are so great. These are the kind of things he puts into his compositions. But if you don't know about them, you'll never see them. If you're an artist who knows about these,
That's why I watch these things.
well, then you're going to see them in Frank
Maybe
Frazetta's
it's not
work,
better than
as
music,
well as
but
some other great illustrators' work. But if you're a student who hasn't learned this, and you're looking at Frank Frazetta's work, you're not going to see it because you don't know what to look for. The interesting thing is, the more you know, the more you're going to see. Now I want to talk about a couple of important principles of composition. So the first one is lose detail at periphery. So in this painting, you can see, for example, that there's more detail to be found on her. I'm going to enlarge her so you can see what all of this detail looks like. And you can see that Frazetta adds the earrings,
sorry, bumping the
the
camera.
shapes, and over here, the little shapes there, and the clothing here consists of these small shapes. This little shape here, the jewelry on her leg, those little spots that you see, it's all detail. And then over here, where the arm is and where the other arm is, the knife is also a detail. Even the shadow right there underneath the jaw is a small shape, therefore it's a detail. And on the face, you see the little nose sticking up, even the navel is a detail. And then this dark right there under her arm, the armpit is that little shape. So all of these little shapes, they add up to a lot of detail on the figure. The that's what it looks like. Most of the detail is found on the figure. Now I'll reduce it back down to actual size. The creature here and the rock, there's less detail to be found there. So as you move away from the center of interest, which of course is this woman here, there should be less and less detail that you indicate. And that's why when you look at the rock here, there's hardly any detail here. The rock is painted more loose and more suggestive with very little details, a little bit here, some suggestion here of the rock texture. But for the most part, there's not much going on here with this rock is. And the reason for not putting a lot of detail here and here, for example, is to focus more on the woman. If everything was painted in the same amount of detail and finish that you see on the woman, the creature, the rock, the surroundings, then that would take attention away from the woman. So just as in real life, where you see less clearly what is at the periphery of your vision, so that same principle is applied to painting. And you can see that here. There's also the principle of hierarchy of detail going on here as well. So like I pointed out, there's more detail on the woman. She's painted also in a more careful and a bit more tight way than this creature. So on the creature, where you find the detail is of course on the head here. But then you lose as much of what's going on back here. So these are very important principles of composition. In this painting that was done by the great painter Richard Schmidt, you can see the same principle of losing detail as you move more and more away from the center of interest and toward the peripheries of the painting, in order to focus more attention on the center of interest, so that the surroundings do not take attention away from what's really important, which is the center of interest. So you can see how loose and sketchy Richard Schmidt has added the grass and leaves on the tree, the surroundings painted loosely in a more sketchy way, while the more tight and carefully rendered and painted part of the painting is here. He didn't paint her in the same sketchy way that he did the grass and the tree. So therefore, also, because of that, she stands out against her surroundings. And Frazetta uses the same principle in his paintings. And you can see this principle used again and again in his paintings. If you understand this and are able to apply it to your own paintings, you're going to see an immense improvement in your paintings. They're going to take on great visual appeal. Here's another painting by Richard Schmidt in which he applies that same principle of loose detail at periphery. So the girl is painted in a more precise way or a bit more tight than the surroundings. And the surroundings, as you can see, are just loosely suggested. There's hardly any detail to be found there. Everything is painted in a more sketchy way surrounding her, but she isn't painted in that same sort of sketchy way. And therefore she stands out nicely against the background because of this. Now there's also other reasons like value contrast and so forth. But right now I'm focusing in on this principle, which is so important. As you move further and further away from the center of interest, you should apply less and less detail to the painting in order to draw more attention to the center of interest. Otherwise, if you give everything the same amount of detail surrounding the center of interest, your eye is going to be attracted to other parts of the painting.
Okay, let me just stop that for a second right now. What he's saying is so important, and it's something that I learned the hard way. He's saying to, you have a picture, right? And you have a focus point in your picture. Let's say you're drawing a girl or painting a girl or whatever it is, and you want the girl to be the focus point because that's your subject that you're painting. But you're also you're super badass and you're artsy fartsy and you take up the entire page. Well, obviously the girl's not going to take up the entire page, so you have to paint other things like a background. Maybe she's in a park, maybe she's in a backyard, maybe she's on a swing, who knows. But there's an environment involved now, so now you're painting a girl and an environment. And obviously, just to simplify it, you'd have uh, you would put more attention to detail on the girl than you would the environment. You would render the girl out more than you would the environment. So that way your viewers will look at her more than the environment. They'll recognize that she's in an environment and even recognize what that environment is, but they'll still always focus on her because you paid a little bit more attention to detail on her. Um, that was something I learned the hard way. When I started drawing, I only did characters, kind of like what you're seeing here, except I was terrible. I was terrible at drawing, and I always did a whole bunch of characters. Every time or every now and then, I'll do a Throwback Thursday. You could look at those drawings. They're on my website, gmrdrew.art. You can go to my sketchbook page, and you scroll down and you'll find my first sketchbook that goes all the way back to when I was in high school over 20 years ago. So, or maybe it was about 20 years ago or just under, but either way, I'm talking about 20-year-old drawings. And you could look at those and you could see I was drawing characters, only characters, and shitty characters. And I had to learn to do more. And I'm an idiot, or I like to simplify things. So for me, back in the day, simplifying things meant, well, if I want to draw characters, but I want to draw a character in an environment, much like the girl in the park idea I was just talking about. Well, then I had to take up the page. And so I would draw a character, and then I would just kind of draw whatever I would in on the page. If you guys see my Patreon commission that I did of Jiraiya, that would be something a little more akin to what I used to do, where it's mainly just me drawing a character and then me throwing just abstract things in the background to help focus onto the character, but also to take up the page. And so I started doing things like that, but very poorly. And then me being the idiot that I was like, oh, you know what I got to do is render everything out, because I wanted to get better at environments. And for me, I thought getting better at environments meant to render out environments just as much as I would render out characters. And because I always want to draw characters, because that's my focus, I would render out a character and I would render out environments. I have an old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle picture that I did with them, and it got really rough, and I actually really want to go back and redo that picture, just because I had them on a rooftop with the skyline in the background, tagging up a billboard that had a design on it, but also their tag design that Michelangelo was spray painting onto it. There was just a lot going on, and I rendered everything out. This is around the time when I was teaching myself, maybe 5 years ago, how to ink things, when I was just teaching myself to ink instead of drawing. Or maybe it was when I was learning markers. I think it was markers, because I remember, yeah. It was definitely when I was learning markers. And that was another thing that made it really rough, was because I was trying to render with markers, or trying to learn how to render with markers. I hadn't gotten to like this level where I learned to kind of mix things. You know what I mean? Nowadays, I'm pretty comfortable with my marker rendering. Like sometimes it's still a little choppy like it is here, but I can live with it. I have goals that I set for myself. I achieve those goals, and but when I started using markers, I couldn't render at this level. And I rendered an entire scenery at that level. And you could see here, even though I rendered a whole entire scene, you focus on the guy here. You focus on what I want you to focus on, the character and the ice thing. Hell, you don't even really see the girl standing here admiring it, and you maybe see her, but still you know the main focus is this guy, and then out of these two, you're probably gonna focus on him more, just because of that. Little things like that that I wasn't doing back in the day. You know, even things like this with me doing the rendering here, you know, I spent a little bit more time on the character than I did on the environment. I rendered out the character more than I did the environment. You focus on the character more than the environment. Is exactly what I'm talking about. I had to learn that, and I learned it the hard way. I went through a lot in order to get to this point. Um, and yeah, like I said, I wanted to put my sketchbooks on my website, so please check those out because I wanted to show people like, I mean, I'm not the greatest, but I was a lot worse. I was a lot worse, or really bad back in the day. You know what I'm saying? And um, so to be able to even do things like this, and even something like this, like I had to learn little tricks and techniques in order not to fill up an entire page that I wanted to, or fill up the area that I wanted to, so that way I didn't just have a character sitting on a blank background. Um, and yeah, just I really appreciate what this guy's talking about. You know, half the stuff he's been talking about I kind of know about already. It's always nice to like relearn and re-listen to these things and all that stuff. So you know, I really appreciate it. But yeah, man, that's, you know, um, again, it's when I do these things like the background, there's stuff going on, but you don't really see it. You know what I mean? You definitely just focus on the character because he's being rendered out more. Um, One like this looks a lot better than one like that, and it's because I probably need to actually go back in here and render it out a bit more. And but I'm not gonna do that. Like I got what I needed out of it, but I would still say this one's easier to see than this one, even though some people may prefer this one over that one. You know, that's just like an an idea, but or an opinion. My bad. So, um, but yeah, this goes to what I was saying about rendering things is you can really see the buildings as opposed to the trees and the bushes here. Like you focus on the buildings more. That's on purpose. Where this one, maybe not so much, just because everything is a little bit muddied together. It's almost done on purpose, but it isn't. I didn't throw any black into this picture, and you could tell just because I sign it with black ink. Where this one does have black, so it's a little bit more easy to focus on what I want you to see. Where this one I didn't do that, and that was a choice that I made. Um, and you know, like I said, I got what I needed out of this, but I could see myself working on this a little bit more and rendering it out a little bit more to give it that focus. But anyways, just as a thing that guy was saying, because I know that a lot of people out there are a lot like me, where you know they just sat there and they drew characters all day, and they would leave the background blank. And you know, maybe you want to do more, just maybe you're like me, where you're like, ah, man, you know, I need to do more in order to not just draw characters on a blank background. Because you see all these amazing pieces, and you know they'll draw a background. There's stuff going on back there, and it's just steps to learn things in order to do that. And the only way you're ever going to be able to do that is by putting in the time to learn to do it. And you're going to suck in the beginning, and it's going to be rough. And yeah, man, you're not going to, you know, you're going to hate your work for a while, and you're going to want to retreat away from it because you're more comfortable with just, you know, characters on a blank background because that's what you've done. All this time you spent a lot of time at it. Well, same goes with everything else. Spend a little time on it, and you'll end up, you know, doing some amazing things. And I'm grateful that, you know, these are all things that I taught myself too, by the way. I'm grateful that I took the time to do that. I know I still have plenty to go, and plenty to learn to do. You know, even something like this, I knew I was gonna go in and digitally finish it, so I wasn't worried about it because I knew all the stuff that wanted to do was gonna be or anything that I needed to do in order to make this picture a little bit more clear, maybe. Um, I was going to be able to do it digitally. And that was the plan from Jump Street. So that's why I didn't mind making this one a little bit more muddy, a little bit more busy. But this is, you know, this is me really pushing it. And it may not be the greatest, but I think this might have even been the first time I was practicing with these brush pens. I think I had just recently bought these brush pens and I was practicing with it because I'm kind of looking at it now and I was like, oh yeah, I was really trying to practice with some things here. And that's another reason why it looks not super great. And it's only because I was practicing. Um, and I also knew I was going to be able to digitally fix and touch up whatever I wanted to. The final digital picture should, you know, I threw this on as some like t-shirts and merch stuff and things like that as well. So you could check that out. I believe it's on my website. If it's not, I need to put that up. But yeah, this would be kind of an idea of what I'm talking about, where I want you to focus on the character, but I had to draw all this background stuff in order to get it. And yeah, just like the Jiraiya, whatever I did, the commission with random background stuff. Same thing here. You know, abstract background with characters in it, and yeah, whatever. Check out the digital one because I definitely fixed it and touched it up and did all that other stuff with it. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna let the video ride now. Let me shut up.
Now this illustration by David Finchs, you can see the same principle being applied. So all of this, as you can see, doesn't really have enough detail, especially here. There's no detail there. There's a little bit here where the leaves are, and there's some detail here with all these little shapes. But for the most part, this area doesn't have the kind of detail that you find here within this area. So therefore, your attention is drawn to the center of interest, which is found within this area here. And surroundings don't detract your attention from the center of interest because the surroundings don't have that kind of detail. Now all of this space over here was needed because this was done for a magazine article, so this is the place where the text would be put. Something like this, with the heading for the story. Just a beautifully done illustration by Bernie Hughes. This drawing here, you can see a strong silhouette shape. And he knows the importance of establishing a clear, strong silhouette shape and a storyline. There's a storyline here. All of this is the storyline making
Oh wow.
clear.
Yeah, one of his inks of Death Dealer.
Immediately what's going on here just by the silhouette shape that I'm outlining here, like this, coming around like that. The figures both read clearly because they've been set against a plain background. There's nothing in the background to distract attention away from these two figures. And Frazetta, of course, is also applying symbolism. The black of this character symbolizes evil, while she has lighter values on her, which symbolize the opposite of evil. She has a more innocent look. So she's more innocent, while this character is more evil. And it's just a beautiful drawing, great composition. There's another wonderful painting by Frazetta. When it comes to composition, it's based on simple geometric shapes and lines. So, for example, we'll do this quick little sketch here. This is basically what the composition is like. First, for the gesture of the figure, then there are these curves in the background, and then there's opposing curves like that. And you can see that here, for example, This is the triangle. Here's the curve. And that curve, as you can see, is the gesture of the figure. Runs right through the figure like that. Figure appears somewhat curved, and then those curves in the figure are repeated within the background. And even here, and then there's this slight curve here, opposing those other curves. So by repeating the gesture or curve of the figure in the background, he strengthens or reinforces the gesture of that figure. Beautifully done, and this composition is so effective largely because it is so simple. The best compositions have this kind of underlying simplicity of structure to them, in which what you place within the setting appears also within the figure, and in this case it's this curve. He's a master of composition as well as a master of the figure. In addition, what I need to point out is you'll notice that this curve is going this way, while the others back there are going in the opposing direction. So there's a balance here of direction. You can't have all of them going in one direction. You have to have something that opposes that direction, going in the opposite direction, to create a balance of direction. And that's what he does. And that repetition of these curves with varying sizes helps to establish a rhythm. And that rhythm is repeated within the figure, not just by that curve going through the figure like that, but when you look at the edge of the shapes here, the head, and then the back has a curve, and then the buttocks are, that has a curve. So there's a rhythm being set up within the figure itself. And those curves also are going in the opposing direction to the ones in the background. So a beautiful balance, so simple, but yet so difficult to achieve. Now there's a lot more going on in this wonderful painting, but I can't point out everything here, that would take too long. And I have to add, you might think, well, these compositions are so simple, I should be able to do that. Well, actually, the more simple of a composition you try to establish, the more difficult it actually becomes. And that's largely because every shape and line that you put down has to be meaningful. It has to contribute to what you want to say through the figure, if you have a figure or figures within your illustration.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find the right shapes, the right lines, the right symbols that will help to express what you want to say. And that's not that easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to establish these kind of simple compositions, then what you really end up with is a bunch of shapes and lines that
A bunch.
because they don't help to express the emotion of the character. And putting in a bunch of meaningless lines and shapes, that's easy to do. But try to make them meaningful, like in this painting, that then becomes difficult. So what I want to focus in on now are the kind of lines and shapes that Frazetta uses. So in this painting here, for example, you see this dark shape, like this, and that dark shape is made up of these more jagged lines. It's like this, for example. You see? In other words, he doesn't use a straight line like that without adding a break or two within that line, like this. And I'm going to enlarge this so you can see those breaks. So focusing in on this area right here, you can see those breaks. I'm going to enlarge this even more. See, it's like this, coming up like that, and then there's a break, coming down, there's a break, you see? See that break? And then over like this. Can you see how jagged that line is? It's not like this. There's a break in the line. It makes that line more interesting and more dynamic because the lines also are at an angle. Diagonal lines make the drawing or painting look more dynamic. And these kind of lines here, and I'm talking about the edge of a shape in terms of a line. So those more angular, jagged lines, they determine what the character of the shape is. So if you have a shape that has more angular or broken lines, as it's also referred to, then that shape will have a more jagged looking character. And coming around like this, over like that. See, it's not like this. Not like that. That's a smooth, more streamlined edge. But you can see that there are these slight changes, you see? These slight breaks. And here also, the line breaks. So he seems to use that kind of character of line. But there are other ways to do this also. You can, of course, have shapes that are more streamlined like this, where there are more curves to the edge of the shape. It all depends on what look you're going for, what the feeling is that you're after. What does it feel like? Does it feel like the character is more rugged, or is the character more soft and feminine-like? What's interesting to note also is that there are internal shapes. There's the silhouette shape, which is the overall shape of the subject. Then there are internal shapes within that silhouette shape. And those internal shapes are what I just pointed out to you here. It's the shadow shape. Within that overall silhouette shape, so there's a shape within the shape, and then there's a shape over here, another internal shape, and a small one where the eye is. You see up here? So those are the internal shapes, and then you have the silhouette shape, or overall shape. And what's interesting to note is that the internal shapes here are more complex looking than the silhouette shape. So there's a small dark shape here also. So these are the darks, or shadow shapes, but then, of course, there's also the lighter shapes, which are these shapes here. A lighter tone to them. And over here where the arm is, and parts of the head. See, the lighter shape here, here, then here's the dark, and the dark shape around the eye. And there's also a light shape right there, so I'll outline that. So these are the internal shapes. You have the overall silhouette shape that you have to design. That overall silhouette shape in this case here is an elegant shape. It's elegant because it is a simple shape. However, the internal shapes are more complex. Like the shadow shape is more complex because it has this more irregular edge to it, like that. It's rather busy or noisy. Something like this, if I make a shape like this, that side of the shape is a rather noisy shape because there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of irregularity. So that becomes a complex side of the shape. However, when you look over here on the other side, well, that is a simple side. You don't see that kind of irregularity there. You see these more flowing, more streamlined lines along the edge. And actually that's what you also see in Frazetta's shapes here, because the back of the character, as you can see here, is more simple looking compared to this shadow shape here, with that more complex or noisy or busy edge that you see there. The two sides of the shape are different, just like what you see here. One side is simple, the other is more complex. See how simple that edge looks along the character's back? Just a simple, more streamlined edge. Matter of fact, the whole silhouette shape is a more simple, more streamlined shape. It's an elegant shape, in other words, that Frazetta creates here. Simple shape is a more elegant shape. Let me show you what that shape looks like in black with the background removed. And you can see how more simple that shape is. It doesn't have that kind of irregular contour like you see here, that noisier, busy edge to the shape. It's a more streamlined, more simple, overall silhouette shape like that, which makes this beautiful and elegant shape. See, he didn't do anything like this, adding a more complex or noisy edge to that shape.
All right. And oh, I didn't even draw his hair. Come on. There we go. How long have we been at this? 2 hours? Yeah, I spent a little bit more time on these because these poses are a little more dynamic. And, you know, so I got to play with the anatomy a little bit more than when I do when he's just kind of standing there. And, you know, try to get these outfits right, you know what I'm saying? Like try to get, you'll see like when I started these, you know, the poses are very static, standing still, let me get the pose, let me get the clothes, let me get comfortable drawing this guy. And then kind of wanted to flex a little bit here, but this is still a little stiff, you know. And then finally, after a while, this one has like some good angles on it, and tried to get the clothes a little bit more baggier on him, even though he's a thinner character. Like, you know, wearing layer upon layer starts to thicken up. So same thing. And then I finally cut loose here. I really liked this last bit here, especially him ducking like that, getting that. There's so much like going on. I love it. So yeah, I wanted to you know, get one with the fur coat, and you know, I got a few of them in there, and then I started going a little bit crazy and dynamic with it because I was like, I don't want to just keep drawing him, you know, just standing there stiff. So let's get angles, let's get differences, let's get a little bit of this and that going, and yeah, man, I've got 2 different clothing styles here, 3 of those, 3 of this, and it super awesome, man. I really like this. Really having a lot of fun with these. You can see the difference between when I start like warming up to like when I'm just starting cold with stuff. Even though I really do like this one here. I really like this one. But yeah, other than that, you can see the difference between those when I'm trying to like get started with something, and then these here when I'm like really starting to get the idea of what I'm trying to actually achieve here. But yeah, you know, just over 2 hours, and anybody who's still watching, man, you are a saint. So that's gonna be it for this one. I'm G Mr. Drew. That's at G Mr. Drew on all socials. You can follow, like, and subscribe. You know, if you're catching this on YouTube, you can catch me live on Twitch if you care to join me and, you know, just talk to me and chat with me while I do these things. More than welcome. And if not, you can watch them on Patreon as well. Most of the videos you actually have to be a patron, starting at $1, just for regular support. But starting at $3 a month, there's commissions involved. So, you know, if you have characters, anything like that that you want to see me tackle, and, you know, that way you have it. You know, just let me know. Or if you have any original characters you want me to just kind of have fun with. I love doing that. I love working on people's original characters just because they're original, you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, I get to do anything? And then I have a ton of fun with it, and people usually like what ends up happening. But yeah, if you don't want to support me on Patreon, but you want to hire me straight up, I'm also G Mr. Drew on Fiverr, so check that out. Other than that, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, just, you know, sharing things on Twitter and and quoting things, whatever. And then on Instagram, putting 2 pictures up a day. And other than that, that's gonna be it for this one, man. I really hope you guys enjoyed these things. Hope you had a lot of fun. I certainly did. Hopefully these are getting a little more interesting. That's probably gonna be the way that these go. Is I do like some pretty stiff standard standing poses just to try to get the outfit right, get the clothing. You know what I mean? Because I'm working with. On today's stream, I was working specifically with these 2 pictures here. So I took these and did this with it. So, there's a bit of thinking that still has to go involved. So it's a lot easier to try to get the thinking done with a simpler pose like these 2 than it is with something else. But then I can get crazy with it once I get like, oh, okay, I got the idea of these clothes. And again, I was watching David Finch's channel, I think, at the beginning of this stream, and now I'm watching Online Art Academy. I believe this is probably my first video watching with them, but I'm going to be looking them up and trying to watch some more. This specific video we've been listening to is called Frazetta and What He Did to Make His Figures and Compositions Great, which, obviously, I think if you're watching this at this point, you're probably interested in doing something like that. So, for sure, get to it. Other than that, thank you for watching the Andrew Glowczewski Experience. This is episode 197, working on character concepts. Love you. Peace.